Okay, thank you. Okay, let's start again. ठीक है. Hello. Very good afternoon to all of you. कैसे हैं सब? Am I audible now? Am I audible now? Shall we continue? Okay, thank you. Okay. चलो. So sorry, there was a technical problem. So anyway, sorry. So today we'll be talking about CSR and social governance. Initially, as per the timetable, today was supposed to be audit and due diligence, but there was some error. There was some unavoidable problem, so we had to switch. So today I'll be taking the CSR and social governance, and tomorrow Sagar Tolani sir will be taking the audit and DD as per the timetable. Okay, so what do you know about this subject, CSR and social governance? What do we already know about CSR? We have heard about this topic, CSR, in your at your executive level. As per the recent changes, the CSR part has been removed from the executive part and it has been put completely in the professional. But you all must have some idea about the subject CSR. Yes, what is CSR? It is corporate social responsibility. That is a very common answer. Not, but I want to elaborate answer. What is corporate social responsibility? Why was it introduced? Why is it important in today's world? So basically, most of the companies, most of the corporates need corporate social responsibility. Not just the people in the economy, but the companies, the corporates need corporate social responsibility. It has become very important. It has become one of the tool for the companies, in order to develop. Because in today's world, without CSR, no company can compete into this business world. Okay? So CSR is a must. CSR के बिना possible ही नहीं है. Okay? So all the companies have to resort to eventually go to CSR. For that very reason, this has been introduced into your syllabus at a professional level. Yeah. Because when you enter into the job market, many companies are offering role only for CSR specialist. This is a new position that has been, going on in many organization. So for that reason, they have introduced this subject called CSR and social governance into your professional level, and this is an open book subject. Okay, so you don't need to memorize anything. Don't need to learn anything. You just need to be there in the lectures, discuss with me. We'll discuss all the questions in the lectures itself, and mostly 80 to 90% of your preparation will be done in the class itself. What rest 20%, that is only reading part that you'll have to do on your own. Okay, but uh, by my past students have given me this feedback that most of the preparation of this subject is done in the class itself. Okay, बाद में ज़्यादा effort नहीं लगता है. So कैसे easy हो जाएगा? Why, how, and why it will be easy for you? Okay, so first thing, these are your CSR notes. Okay, we have made this notes at JK Shah CSR के लिए, CSR and social governance. So it has, first thing that we have is an index covering all the topics of your syllabus. Each and every topic of your syllabus is covered in the index, and not just your module page number, but even your JK Shah classes page number is given in the index itself. Then the second thing that we have is your case law index. Okay, after the main index we have a case law index. In this index we have covered all the case laws that are covered in this syllabus. Okay, both CSR and social governance, we have made a proper index of all the case laws and the summary of the case laws. So in the exam, if in case they are asking any case laws, so you can simply refer this index and you can answer the question. And Along with this case law index, we have another index called as the examples index. This is an examples index. This is a very like new thing. In your CSR subject, they have given practical examples of how companies are conducting CSR, whether it is your CSR policy or their CSR implementation mechanism, or how different companies have done their CSR expenditure. All these things are given in your module. And in the past exams, in the past four attempts, they have asked questions from these examples also. So for that reason, we have also made a examples index. And so we have three index basically. First is your content index, second is your case law index, and third is your example index. Okay. Then along with that, we have compiled all the gray boxes in the module. Now you have cleared your executive, so you already know how important is the gray box. So we have compiled all the gray box topics together. Then we have multiple question papers. Then we have CSR FAQs, that is the companies which are facing practical difficulties in CSR, in complying with the CSR. Those FAQs have been included in this. Okay, so in case they want to make the paper difficult, they can ask from that. Okay, then we have the past question papers. We have all the amendments, recent amendments in the LODR, ICDR, that in the social stock exchange part, we are going to be needing this. And we have the barracks also of various chapters of, for example, your partnership act, your foreign contribution act. Okay, so all these things have been included in the notes itself. ठीक है. सो आपके एंड से ज्यादा मेहनत लगेगा नहीं. जितना भी आपको मेहनत करना है, सारा मेहनत हमने ही कर दिया है. ठीक है. सो at your end, the only thing that you have to do is read. Okay, I'll be explaining all the concepts in the lecture itself. Then you have to read it along with me. And after that also, after lecture also, once read the entire chapter, then your most of your preparation will be done. Okay, और कुछ इस सब्जेक्ट में needed नहीं है. ठीक है, और ज़्यादा प्रिपरेशन इस सब्जेक्ट में नीडेड नहीं है. सब्जेक्ट जो है वो काफ़ी सिंपल है, वेरी इजी. Okay, it is not that difficult to understand. It is not very technical, but it is very interesting. Okay, you must know the subject is very interesting. It will be very smooth. Okay, but जर्नी जो होगा काफ़ी स्मूथ होगा. बहुत ही सिंपल टॉपिक्स है और अच्छे से इंटरेस्टिंग बनाएंगे अपन. सो the reason you need lectures for this subject is basically when the subject is a theoretical subject, so you can't like अगर तुम उसको रीड करने बैठोगे तो it is kind of boring. Okay, but to make it interesting, that is my job. Okay, so I'll be doing that in the class itself. It will be very interesting. Okay, we'll be doing this with a lot of practical examples, that how companies are approaching, how the issues are existing in India, how different issues have been resolved in the recent times because of the CSR initiatives by so and so companies. So we'll be doing all that in the class itself. So it's going to be a very interesting journey. Okay, so shall we start with the chapter number 1, that is the first topic of this subject. First, let's see the index. थोड़े topics देख लेते हैं अपन. Okay. Let's see all the topics that we are going to cover in this subject. Okay, so I'll show how this subject has been divided. Okay, okay. So the first topic that we are going to cover is your CSR. First chapter का नाम ही CSR है. Okay, it is the base of your syllabus, corporate social responsibility. What are the legislations? As you must already know, section 135 आपने पहले सुना होगा in your executive level. So we are going to cover section 135, CSR policy rules, and any other clarifications which are given by the MCA, schedule 7. Okay, all those things are covered in the chapter number 1 itself. Okay, then the second part, that is CSR policy. That is how different companies make their CSR policy. अलग अलग कंपनीज अपना CSR पॉलिसी कैसे बनाते हैं. So we are going to be drafting a CSR policy for a company. Then CSR projects and implementation agency, how the CSR projects are conducted and how they are implemented through various implementing agencies. Then social impact assessment, what is, how once you have completed the CSR project, how it is assessed. चेक कैसे किया जाता है कि प्रोजेक्ट सक्सेसफुल था कि नहीं था. हाउ टू चेक द सक्सेस ऑफ द प्रोजेक्ट, दैट इज योर social impact assessment and CSR audit. And guidelines on CSR, there are multiple guidelines that have been given for CSR for different sectors, for example insurance sectors, banking sector, public sector undertakings. हर सेक्टर के लिए अलग अलग गाइडलाइन दिया गया है. सो वी आर गोइंग टू बी स्टडिंग ऑल दोस गाइडलाइंस इन दिस चैप्टर, चैप्टर नंबर 5. Then 6 is CSR and Sustainable Development Goals. In the chapter number 6, we are going to talk about corporate governance. We are going to talk about interrelation between various guidelines, between various principles that have been laid down for the CSR. And the last one being impact of CSR. How the impact of CSR is measured, how many types of impact assessments are there. ये सब अपन करने वाले इन चैप्टर नंबर 7. सो दैट इज बेसिकली योर पार्ट ए, दैट इज 50 मार्क्स. पार्ट ए आपका कितना है, 50 मार्क्स. ओके. एंड part A only comprises of corporate social responsibility and everything related to corporate social responsibility. Next is your part 2, that is social governance, that is also for 50 marks. Okay. Part B is also for 50 marks, social governance part. Okay. इसमें अपन क्या डील करने वाले, व्हाट आर वी गोइंग टू स्टडी इन द सोशल गवर्नेंस पार्ट. सो पार्ट ए talks about corporate social responsibility, how the corporates carry out their social responsibility. Now part B talks about all the other entities, all the non-corporate entities. Okay, non-corporate as in it can be your trust, it can be your society, it can be a sole proprietorship, it can be your LLP. Any other entity which is not a corporate is called a non-corporate entity. Okay, so we are going to talk about how the different non-corporate entities, that is a partnership firm, sole proprietorship, trust, societies. So we are going to talk about how they are carrying out their social governance. Even your government, okay, municipalities, okay, gram panchayat. So all these, how they are undertaking their social responsibility towards the country, that is covered in the social governance part. Okay, so the first chapter of part B, that is part 2, that is chapter number 8, social governance. Social governance simply talks about how it is undertaken, how it has evolved, how the concept of social governance has evolved, how the companies undertake social governance, how the government undertakes social governance, what are the benefits, what are the limitations, what are the advantages. Yes, all these are part of social governance. Then chapter number 9, very important, social stock exchange. You all must have done some part of it in the executive level. Even at the professional level, this is overlapping in another subject. Okay, so this is very important from exam point of view. Social stock exchange, we are going to cover all the aspects of the social stock exchange, how the NPOs can list their securities on the list their projects on the social stock exchange, what is the criteria, what is the registration requirement, what is the 292E, that is the how they can list their projects. So all those things we are going to cover in the 9th chapter. Then chapter number 10 talks about contribution of non-corporate entities in the social governance. Okay, how different types of non-corporate entities carry out social governance. Very easy chapter. Then chapter number 11, that is societies and trust. We are going to be covering in detail about the functions of the society, who can be a trustee, who cannot be a trustee, what are the functions of the trustee. You all must have already covered this in the executive in your EBCL. Okay, but again we'll be covering that. Then chapter number 12, partnership firm, very fun chapter. Okay, you all must have already done it at the foundation level also, at the executive level also, in your self-finance courses also. Now again at the professional level we are going to be covering. Then chapter number 13 and chapter number 16, these are quite similar chapters. Chapter number 13 and chapter number 16 are similar chapters. Once you're done with chapter number 13, you're already done with half part of chapter number 16. Okay, so these are similar chapters. What do they talk about? They talk about the model code for the meetings of the non-corporate entities and for the meetings of the Gram Panchayat. Chapter number 13 talks about model code for the meetings of non-corporate entities, and chapter number 16 talks about the model code for the meetings of Gram Panchayat. Okay, so major part of this chapter is very similar. There are few additional topics in the chapter number 16, but we are going to cover all of that. Okay, so it is basically a blueprint for the non-corporate entities as well as the gram panchayats as to how they can carry out their meetings. कैसे वो लोग अपना meetings conduct कर सकते हैं, कितनी frequency पे. For example, for the companies, they have given the entire procedure for the meetings in the Companies Act. Frequency of meetings, quorum of the meetings, notice of meeting, notice of adjourn meeting, everything is given in detail in the Companies Act. But there is no such provision for the non-corporate entities or for the Gram Panchayat, and for that reason, they have introduced this on a voluntary basis. ICSI has given a voluntary model code that any non-corporate entity can adapt. Okay. The next is your financial and non-financial reporting of different non-corporate entities. That is, what is the reporting requirements of the different non-corporate entities. As such, there are not many requirements. Okay, for example, if you take into account your sole proprietorship, they do not have any financial reporting framework. Okay, they need not make any financial reporting, but other entities such as societies, such as partnership, they might have a few reporting requirements, and that those requirements are covered in this chapter. And chapter number 15 talks about foreign funding, that is your FCRA. Okay, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, that they have covered in this. Okay, so it will feel like a revision to your executive because many chapters are repeat. For example, chapter number 9, social stock exchange, that you have already covered. Then this sole proprietorship, partnership, trust, societies, all that also you have covered. So that is also like a revision. Societies and trust, partnership firm, all these things are repeat. And this foreign funding. So part B is mostly like revision of your executive. Okay, but there are a few additional topics, so we are going to cover all of it. Don't worry. Okay, from scratch we are going to do everything. Okay, so just sit back and relax. Okay, so now can we start with the topic 1, chapter number 1, that is your corporate social responsibility. Okay, now what do you mean by the term corporate social responsibility? What does it mean? What is corporate social responsibility? Why do we need corporate social responsibility? Anyone? Okay, so basically, uh, the government needed the help of the corporates to help them in the developmental priorities. Okay, for that reason, initially it was introduced in the Indian mandate, Indian legislation के अंदर CSR इसलिए introduce किया गया था because government wanted help in the developmental process. But what is the proper meaning of CSR? What is the concept of CSR? How did the concept of CSR come into picture? Okay, so the concept is basically the corporates are taking resources from the society. Okay, they are taking the manpower, they are using the resources, they are harming the environment to a certain extent. So they are taking some things from the society. So it is their responsibility to give back to the society. That is the basic concept of corporate social responsibility. Okay, and it is a very like old concept because अभी इंडियन लेजिस्लेशन में अभी आया है. It has been introduced into the Indian legislation in 2014, but the concept of CSR is existing since ancient times. Okay, even since your Mahabharat Vedas के time से it has been into existence, but the name was different. Okay, the concept, the term corporate social responsibility has come into picture now. अभी recent, it has been introduced in after 1980s or something. Okay, so why do we need corporate social responsibility? Okay, so companies, if they do not consider corporate social responsibility, they can do reckless use of their resources, they can exploit the resources of the society, and many companies were doing so. Okay, they were not considering the other aspects of the business, that is your relevant stakeholders, that is your consumer, that is your shareholder, that is your employee. They were not considering the benefit of other stakeholders, and for that reason CSR came into picture to teach the companies how they can, they have to consider the other factors of the business. Okay, not just profit making. Profit making is essential for running the business, but they have to consider the other aspects as well. They have to integrate other aspects as well. They have to integrate the social, environmental, and economic problems. Okay, they have to give solutions for these things. For example, earlier the companies were just exploiting the natural resources, they were exploiting the environment. They had no accountability for that. Okay, and they were just blatantly using all those resources. Okay, now because of CSR they are accountable for their actions. They have to consider what impact do they have on the environment, and accordingly they have to monitor that. Okay, they have to change that, they have to mitigate those negative consequences. That is because of CSR. Earlier the companies used to treat their employees like they wanted to. They used to make them work for 16 hours, 20 hours. Okay, then because of the emergence of CSR, that has been regulated. Nowadays companies are acknowledging that they need to give, a work life balance to the people. Okay, for that reason CSR is important. Even for the society in general, they have to take extra efforts for the society, for the community in which they are operating. That is the basic concept of CSR. Okay, they are taking resources from the society, they are using the manpower, they are using the resources, they are causing a harm to the environment. So for that reason they have an accountability towards the people, towards the environment. That is the core concept of CSR. They have to give back to the society in which they are operating. Okay, so CSR is a process in which organization work towards the protection and well-being of the society by taking responsibility for the impact of their operation and activities on the consumer, on the employees, on the shareholder, and the environment. Okay, they have to take into consideration their impact on these things, that is the consumer, the employees, the stakeholders, and the environment. Earlier the companies used to make products not keeping in mind the consumer, but keeping in mind only the profit. Okay, they used to use cheap materials. For example, they used to use chemicals which were not good for the consumers. Okay, you all must have heard about the company called Johnson and Johnson. There was a report about that company that the products used by that company were cancerous, that is carcinogenic substances were used in the unit in its product. Okay, later on there was a report about the company, then they had to call back those products, they had to apologize to the public. Okay, so these kind of things when they come into the media, it causes a lot of reputational damage to the company, and they are causing actual damage to the people who are using the products. Not just that company, a lot of other companies, they have been using the materials which are not good. For example, many smartphone companies are using batteries which are not compatible with the device. They are blasting. Okay, they catch fire easily. Okay, so it can cause real damage to the people. Okay, so for that reason they have to consider uh, the consumers, that is the end user of that product, and they have to keep in mind how it may affect the consumer. Nowadays most of the companies are afraid of using any substandard product, because they know that once it goes onto the social media, their reputation is going to be tarnished forever. Okay, so for that reason CSR is important. So for the consumer and for the employees also, how they are treating their employees is very important. Even today in India, you all must have heard a lot of CEOs from various companies. They have commented that people should work for like 72 hours. They should work even on Sundays. Okay, that is the current state in India today, even today. But they have to practice. They have to give their employees time for their a family. They have to give maintain a proper work life balance. They have to give sick leaves properly. They have to give weekend leaves. Okay, that is a bare minimum. Okay, that is bare minimum nowadays. It is nowadays other countries are even practicing a 3 4 day work week. Okay, to increase their productivity, and they can also have a good social life. Okay, so how they are treating their employees, whether any employee is getting injured because of the work that is doing, any uh, workplace is having any toxic chemicals, even in the factories, there is, if there is any proper labeling, there is any proper safety equipments. Okay, so all those things need to be kept in mind. Then even for a shareholders, okay, all the steps that a company is taking might affect the value creation for the shareholders. For example, even if the company is not treating its employees properly and that news has been spread on the media, then the company's valuation will get affected. And since the company's valuation is affected, even the shareholders will suffer eventually. Okay, so for that reason, company has to work towards all the various elements. That is the environment, that is the people, the consumers, the employees. All those things need to be taken into consideration at the same time and with the same weight. Okay. And the social actions of the companies, how the company is socially aware. Okay, nowadays, this has become very important for the companies to become socially aware, how they are marketing their product, what type of packaging are they using, how they are using recycling of their products. Okay, all these things are very important. They need to consider all these things. Okay, nowadays people are willing to pay more for the products if they are ethically sourced. Okay, you must have come across this term called this product is ethically sourced, or this product has a zero carbon footprint or less carbon footprint. So people are willing to pay more for such products because they have less carbon footprint. Carbon footprint as in how much carbon has been emitted for manufacturing that product. Okay, so nowadays the companies are using waste products into making the good products. For example, your sugarcane husk. Okay, people are using sugarcane husk, which is a waste product. Okay, they are using it to make paper dishes, dishes and bowls and everything. Okay, so that is again an example. There people are using recycled plastic for making furniture and other things. Okay, so all these things are very important. Companies are using it as a strategy to win the consumer's trust. Okay, and they can charge a better price as compared to their competitors because they are using socially ethical products. Okay, how they are testing this product also is also very important consideration. How the product is being tested. Okay, animal testing, earlier the testing used to be done on humans, now that is not allowed. And now even a few animals are banned, that you cannot test on these animals. But completely eliminating animal testing is still inevitable at this moment, but we'll get there someday. Okay, so the European Union has defined CSR as a concept whereby the companies integrate the social environmental concerns in their business operations. So as per, if you talk about section 135, it just merely talks about contributing the 2% profit. Okay, it talks about contributing 2% net profit of your previous three financial average of 3 financial years. So this, the concept of CSR is slightly different from the CSR provision in the Indian legislation. Indian legislation talks about how you can contribute at least 2% of your profits for the eligible activities which are mentioned in the Schedule 7. But the concept of CSR talks about how you can integrate into your business operations the social and environmental concerns. That is how you are treating your employees, how you are treating the environment. Okay, that is different from your section 135. That is talking about philanthropy. That is talking about donation. But the concept of CSR talks about how you can change your company's operation to integrate the social environmental concerns. How can you integrate? For example, if now you are using any machinery which requires fuel, so you can replace it with another machinery which is environment friendly, which is based on solar energy, for example. Or if it is using less fuel, or it is causing less wastage in any case. So you are integrating the environmental concerns into your operation. Now, how can you integrate social concerns? For example, earlier you are making your employees work for, let's say, 16 hours a day. Now you are providing them with adequate time to spend with their family. You are giving them adequate work-life balance. So in the short term, it might affect your company's operations, but in the long term, you will be able to retain more employees, and it will eventually add to your company's wealth. Okay, so that's how you can integrate the social environmental concern into your business operation. And the interaction with the stakeholders on a voluntary basis, how you interact with your various stakeholders on a voluntary basis. CSR legislation is mandatory, but the concept of CSR, how you are integrating into your operations, that is voluntarily. How you want to, exist in the economy, okay, how you want to sustain in the economy, that is where the concept of CSR comes into picture. Uh, okay, so the corporate social responsibility is a technique to reduce investment risk and maximize profit by taking all the stakeholders into key stakeholders into confidence. Okay, how can you reduce your investment risk by CSR, by doing CSR? Okay, how is it relevant? How can you reduce your investment risk by doing CSR? Okay, so once you are complying with the CSR as a concept, okay, not with the provision but with the concept. If you are complying with the concept of CSR properly, then more and more people will likely invest into your company. You will get more investment. You will even the banks will be more likely to invest in provide a loan to your company as compared to the other companies in the market, since your company is a CSR compliant company and you are complying with the concept of CSR. Okay, so that is basically how you are making your products that is environmentally conscious. Okay, environmentally saving the environment, protecting the environment, environmentally steward. Okay, so how you are considering all those things, how you are considering the employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, all those things are also considered while making an investment decision or while giving finance to any particular company. Even the banks keep these things into mind. Okay. So it creates a long-term consumer and employee value by not only creating a green strategy but also considering the social, cultural, and environmental dimensions of a business. So they need to consider all the other factors as well. Okay, they can't just focus on profit making; they have to consider the other factors as well. Okay, so it is basically a tool to develop the reputation of the company in the eyes of the society. Nowadays, the companies are using it as a tool to develop its reputation. Okay. For example, if I ask you, which company can you trust blindly for investing? Okay, which company can you trust blindly for investing in the Indian markets? Now, most of you will have an answer, that is Tata Group. Okay, any company from the Tata Group, you can blindly trust that company. Okay, why do you think that is the case? Okay, because over the years they have built their reputation by doing CSR. Okay, they have been engaged in philanthropy, they have been treating their employees properly, they are making their goods properly, so they are complying with CSR as a concept. Okay, overall concept they are complying with, and for that reason they have such a good reputation among the Indians, and for that reason people can trust their companies. Okay, so the companies can use it as a tool to develop the reputation of the company in the eyes of the society. Okay, I hope the concept of CSR is clear. I hope you know what CSR is, and hope uh, there is no doubt in this thing. Easy. Can we move to the next topic? Next topic is your triple bottom line. Now, what is triple bottom line? Triple bottom line consists of basically three pillars of corporate social responsibility. Okay, what are the three pillars? Okay, What are the three pillars of a company? First being the people of the company. Now, people means it can include your consumers, it can include your employees, it can include your various stakeholders. All those things are included in the people part. Then second is your planet, that is your environment. Okay. How the company is treating its environment. And thirdly, profit. Okay, the company needs profit in order to keep going. Okay, so company cannot survive, company cannot sustain without profits, so it is also equally important. Okay, but if a company wants to be sustainable in the economy, it has to give equal focus, it has to give equal focus to all of these three, that is the people, the profit and the planet. If the company is neglecting any one of them, the company will not be sustainable. Okay, for example, if the company is focusing on its people, okay, they have good policies for the people, they have good policies for the employees, they are making good products for the consumers, they have no complaints from the consumers, they are also having women empowerment programs, they are having programs for spreading equality, non-discrimination policies, everything is good for the people within the organization, employees are very satisfied with the company. Okay, and the company is making good profits in the market, so such a company will be equitable. It will be equitable because it is treating their people in a good manner. Okay, it is equitable because it is treating everyone with equity. They are focusing on the people and the profit. But if they are neglecting the planet part, for example, if the company has its operation in some remote part of India, and because of its operation there are let's say they are polluting the river in that particular area, and because of that the people in that area are suffering, so it can lead to a PIL against the company, and it can even lead to the winding up of a company because of one such complaint. Okay, so in order to survive in the economy, in order to sustain in the economy, it has to keep all the three things. It has to give equal importance to all the three things. That is people, profit, and planet. Now, for example, if the company is considering the planet properly, there is no adverse impact, they are carbon negative basically. Okay, they are selling the carbon credits in the market, they have excess carbon credit with them. Okay, so they are like environmentally they are very conscious, but they are neglecting the people within their organization. For example, a certain employee has been reporting harassment or has been reporting about discrimination of some sort within the organization, and they have not acknowledged it, or they have not taken adequate steps to prevent it. So that employee can file a legal case against the company, and for that reason also the company might have to pay heavy penalties, or might have to pay heavy damages to that person. So for that reason also the company can face major losses. So again, they have to give equal importance to the people. So if the company is giving equal importance to the profit and the environment, it is viable. It is viable for the environment, it is viable for the country, but it is not sustainable. And lastly, if it is caring about its people, okay, it is caring about, it is having good policies for the employees, it is having great environmental initiatives and everything, so it is bearable for the planet. Okay, it is bearable because it is taking care of the people, it is taking care of the planet, but it is not having profits to run. Okay, will it survive in the market? Obviously no. Okay, so when all the three things are kept in mind, only then it becomes sustainable. So they have to give equal importance to all of these three. This is the three basic pillars of the company: people, profit, and planet. Okay, that is your triple bottom line. Okay. So it basically says CSR is the responsibility of an organization for the impact of its decision and activities on the society, the environment, and on its prosperity. Society refers to your people, environment refers to your planet, and prosperity refers to your profit. Okay. known as the triple bottom line of people, profit, and planet. All the three aspects of triple bottom line are closely related to each other. Caring for profit and people will make it equitable and fair. Caring for planet and people will make it bearable, and caring for profit and planet will make it viable. However, when the company cares for all of the three aspects, it will become sustainable. That is the basic concept of triple bottom line. Again, this is very important topic. It has been asked in the previous paper, okay, previous exams. Then next is your significance of CSR to sustainability of business. Okay, why CSR is important in order for business to become sustainable? Why is CSR important? So what are this is basically the benefits of CSR. Okay, it talks about basically the benefits of CSR. If a company is successfully doing CSR, if it is successfully complying with the CSR concept, then it will have so and so benefits. First benefit, what is the first benefit? It is basically reduction of operative cost. Okay, your operative cost will reduce. Operative cost किस तरह से reduce हो जाता है? How will the operative cost reduce because of CSR? Any guesses? CSR की वजह से operative cost कैसे reduce हो सकता है? How can operative cost be reduced because of CSR? Anyone? Okay. So basically, if you are incorporating CSR into your company, then you will be replacing a lot of old redundant machinery. Okay. You will be replacing those machinery with newer equipments which cause less wastage, which are environment friendly. Okay, and because of that, in the short term, at the very moment, your cost may increase, but in the long term, your cost will decrease. Okay, if you are installing a solar panel into your workplace, so your electricity will your fuel cost will reduce, your wastage will reduce, your you know energy cost will reduce. Okay. And there are other, if you are doing recycling of your products, so you'll be also using your wastage basically, so that will also lead to the overall reduction in cost, reduction in operative cost. Okay, so when you change to the newer techniques, okay, so then overall your operative cost will reduce. Okay, because of CSR, your wastage will reduce, your fuel cost will reduce, your employees will be retained in the organization, so your layover cost, employee layover cost will also reduce. So for that reason, there will be a reduction in operative cost because of CSR. Then secondly, increased sale and consumer loyalty. Okay. Your sales will improve because of CSR. How is CSR related to sales in any way? How is CSR related to sales? Okay, so when a company is doing CSR properly, so that leads to a trust in the consumers. Okay, consumers trust such companies who are engaged in CSR, who are doing ethical practices. Okay, nowadays companies are using it as a strategy for marketing. That, for example, a lot of clothing brands, they are saying that cloth for particular cloth has been made from so and so waste product. For example, Levi's, brand that used to recycle the products and make clothes out of it. So for that reason, it could charge more from the people because it was ethically, it was using ethical practices. Okay, even your when nowadays a company are a lot of leather companies are winding up because people are not buying leather. Okay, the demand for leather is subsequently reduced. Okay, so nowadays people are making leather out of this cactus. Okay, vegan leather they call it. Okay, so now such companies are able to sell more products because they are environmentally conscious, they are conducting ethical practices. Okay, so this is an increased opportunity for the people. Okay, this is a very fresh opportunity. Nowadays, most of the companies which are using such practices are growing, okay, in the economy. So for that reason, it can lead to increased sale and consumer loyalty. And thirdly, higher productivity and quality. Okay, when the employees are satisfied within the company, it will automatically lead to higher productivity. For example, if a person is told that he has to work compulsory, he has to work for, let's say, 14 hours today. Okay, so that person's productivity will automatically go down because he is under the stress that he has to work for 14 hours. But if that same person is being told that you can work anytime you want, you can work from your home also if you want, so automatically, naturally, the productivity will improve because of the positive approach towards the work. Okay, the person will be positive towards the work, and accordingly, the productivity will improve. So that is what CSR does to an organization. It improves the productivity of the employees within the organization since they are satisfied with their work. So they are more likely to be loyal towards the company, and their productivity will also improve. Okay. And once the employees know that they are contributing to a better cause, they are changing the society, they are contributing to the environment, automatically their productivity also increases. Okay. Then they have a better access to capital. Okay, these organizations have a better access to capital, in the sense the investors are looking for opportunity to invest in such companies. Okay, nowadays investors are more likely to invest in companies which are, using environment friendly technology, making good use of waste material and everything. So the investors are looking for such opportunities. For example, even your EV business, okay, electronic vehicles, even your scooters and your cars, it is growing because it is an increased demand, because people are becoming more and more environmentally conscious. So people want to put their money in such businesses. Okay, for that reason there is better access to capital. And lastly, it helps to boost the brand image and reputation of the company. It's simply, many of the companies are now using it as an advantage, and their brand image has improved because of the CSR practices. Okay, so in general, it leads to an improved brand image and a better reputation for the company. That is the significance of CSR to business, sustainability of business. So what are the things? What are the benefits? Basically, reduction in operative cost, increased sale and consumer loyalty, higher productivity and quality, better access to capital, and lastly, boosting brand image and reputation. So these are the benefits of CSR, or you can say the significance of CSR to business sustainability. Then next is your historical background of CSR, how the CSR came into picture, how it has evolved over the time. Since when we have been practicing CSR? So basically, if you see, even the ancient period, even the traditional Indian, for example, in the duration of Chanakya, okay, he was an economic advisor for Chandragupta Maurya. Okay, so even he emphasized on this CSR. There was not the term CSR, but the concept of CSR. That is the meaning of CSR. That is, he was more in the favor of operating for the society and not for individual purpose. He explained to the merchants during that era, to the kings during that era, that the more you conduct a social responsibility, the more you conduct the social welfare, the more the people will be supporting you in your venture. Okay, even the king and even the merchants during that era, he approached them, and he advocated CSR, that a man can live individually but can survive only collectively. You need people for your business. If the people are upset with your business, they won't allow you to operate. Okay, and same was the case in the case of kings. Okay, so for that reason, the concept of CSR has been very old and ancient. Okay, even the Vedas say that a man can live individually but can survive only collectively. Hence, we need to form a progressive community by balancing the interest of an individual with that of the society. And philosophers like Kautilya, that is Chanakya, emphasized on ethical practices and principles in his strategy and convinced the merchants and the businessmen to give importance to the social well-being of the community in which they operate. So they have to do it. They don't have an option. If they want to survive in a particular community, they have to do the social welfare of the people in it. In that period, economic structure gave emphasis to the philosophy of Sarva Loka Hitam. Sarva Loka Hitam. Okay. What does it literally translate to? Welfare of everyone. Okay. Sarva means everyone, Loka means people, and Hita means benefit of everyone. Okay. The literature on politics describe the position of dharma, karma, and artha. Dharma means your moral duty as a person, what you're supposed to do. Then karma means your actions, what you're actually doing. And artha means the wealth that you're creating by your actions. So your action have to involve dharma in it. Okay. So these three are connected. Okay. So dharma, karma, and artha have to be simultaneously understood. Okay. So dharma means your moral duty, karma means your actions, and artha means the wealth that you are creating by using those actions. Okay. I hope समझ आया है सब कुछ. I hope this is easy. Okay. Can we move ahead? Can we move ahead? Till now, we have only discussed about the introduction of CSR, that is the basic concept of CSR. Then the triple bottom line, that is the people, profit, and planet. Then we have discussed about the significance of CSR and sustainability to the business, that is what are the various benefits of CSR, and a basic historical background of CSR, that it has been there since the ancient times. Only the term CSR has been coined in recent year, but the concept has been in existence since forever. Okay. The next is your development of CSR in India. How the concept of CSR in India came into picture. Okay. Yes. So how has it developed? Firstly, in 2007, India came up with the 11th Fire Plan. Okay. In the 11th Fire Plan, they used the term called as inclusive growth. Okay. They used the term called inclusive growth, which means that we need to grow collectively. Okay. So even the corporates and also the individuals and other entities have to share the burden of development with the government. That was the meaning of inclusive growth. We all have to do collective efforts in order to grow. That is the inclusive growth that was coined in the 11th 5-year plan. Now, after that, in 2009, the government came up with the voluntary guidelines on CSR. Okay. How you can incorporate CSR into your business on a voluntary basis. They had a set of guidelines, set of principles that the companies can use in order to incorporate CSR into their business. So that came in 2009, voluntary guidelines on CSR. Then further, in 2010, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance 21st Report on Companies Bill 2009 spoke about how the companies can report their CSR expenditure. Okay, it talks about reporting of CSR. It talks about reporting of CSR. Once they have taken any initiative towards CSR, since it was on a voluntary basis, those companies that have conducted any activity towards CSR, how can they report such activity? They provided a mechanism in the company's bill that about the reporting of CSR. Okay. Then further, in 2011, they came up with the National Voluntary Guidelines on Social, Environmental, and Economic responsibilities. Okay, so how a company can incorporate all these things into the business, that is a social, environmental and economic responsibilities into their business operation. Again, this was voluntary, as the name suggests, it is a voluntary guideline on social, environmental and economic responsibilities. Okay. And further, in 2012 they came up with a business responsibility reporting, that is how much impact they are making in the country, that is positive and negative both impacts, and how they are taking steps to mitigate those negative impacts. That was the business responsibility reporting in 2012. And lastly, in 2014, that is the main mandatory provision of CSR under Section 135 of the Companies Act came into picture. That is how the Act 2014 Companies Act introduced the concept of CSR. Okay. So, firstly, there was only a mention about the inclusive growth in the 11th 5 year plan. Secondly, in 2009, they came up with the voluntary guidelines on CSR on a voluntary basis. It was not mandatory, only voluntary basis. Then in 2010, the Parliamentary Standing Committee's report on 21st report on the Companies Bill 2009, it talks about reporting of CSR. Further, in 2011, they came up with the National Voluntary Guidelines on Social, Economical and Environmental Responsibilities. Then further in 2012, they came up with the Business Responsibility Reporting. And finally, in 2014, they came up with the concept of CSR. Okay. Now, what is the concept of CSR? How it has evolved over the time. Earlier, when the concept was introduced, it was termed CSR. The companies were merely doing philanthropic activities. They were just making the donations. Okay, if the CSR was applicable upon them, they were considering कि हाँ सेक्शन 135 के हिसाब से थ्रेशोल्ड जो है वो सेटिस्फाई हो गया है. So they were simply contributing their 2% profit in the Schedule 7 activities, but they were not considering the overall concept of CSR. Okay. Just making the contribution, just making the donation, or making the giving the money to a charitable organization is not CSR. Is not overall concept of CSR. If you want to incorporate the concept of CSR, you have to integrate all the social environmental concerns into your business operation. You'll have to see how you are treating your employees. You'll have to see what type of product are you giving to your consumers, whether they are harmful for the consumers or not. Okay. You'll have to see what are the impact that your manufacturing process is having on the environment. All those things are not mentioned in your section 135. It is not mandatory. They have not given any limit as to how much carbon emission you can do, as to how much how you have to treat your employees. All those things are not given in your section 135. For that, you need to consider the overall concept of CSR. Okay. Now, only the charity part is mandatory. Okay, that is mandatory. That if you are complying with the CSR provision, section 135, you will have to contribute at least 2% of your net profit. That is mandatory. But the overall concept is not mandatory. That is still voluntarily. Okay, so earlier the companies used to only give it for philanthropy, for charity, but nowadays the company have evolved over the time, and they are learning as to how they have to consider the other factors as well, how they are treating their employees, their consumers, and what are the impact of their operations on the environment. All those things are also considered. Okay. So the concept of CSR has changed over the years. Earlier, the business used to conduct the CSR activities through especially dedicated charities only. In recent times, it has evolved from mere philanthropic activities to integrating the interest of the business with that of the society. Okay. And it is a comprehensive set of social policies, practices, and programs that are integrated in the business operation. It is used as a strategy and a business opportunity to earn stakeholders goodwill. That is a good reputation in the minds of the stakeholders. Okay. So it is a new business opportunity, is a strategy that is being used by many of the business organizations. I hope this is clear. Easy, very basic stuff. Okay, not very technical. The technical part of this chapter will start from here. That is section 135. Otherwise, we are just covering what are the basic introduction type things. Okay. Now, these are the principles for CSR. These are called the NGRBC principles. NGRBC principles. Okay. Okay. So, what are these NGRBC principles? You must have, we covered this thing, that is the voluntary guidelines on CSR. Okay. Now, voluntary guidelines on CSR was changed. It was amended to make it into the National Voluntary Guidelines on Social, Environmental, and Economic Responsibilities, and this was further changed. This was further amended to make the NGRBC, that is the National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct. Okay, so it is changed over time. Firstly, it was National Voluntary Guidelines, then it was National Voluntary Guidelines for Social, Environmental, and Economic Responsibilities, and now it is National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct. Okay, so these are the 9 principles which talk about how a company can incorporate these principles in order to incorporate CSR into your organization. So these are basic things which a company must do if it wants to be called as a CSR compliant company. Okay, what are the essentials that a company needs to follow in order to comply with the CSR provision? Okay. So what are those things? First principle, principle one, talks about the company should have integrity. It should be conducting ethical practices. It should be transparent and it should be accountable. Okay. So these are the basic things which the company has to be keep in mind if it wants to be called a CSR compliant company. Okay. So it shall have integrity. What is integrity? It shall be honest about its operation. Okay. It shall have integrity. It shall be ethical. Okay. All the operations in the company shall be ethically conducted. How it is packaging its product, how it is marketing its product, how it is you know transporting its product, all those things need to be ethical. Okay, they need to study the entire life cycle of a product. Okay, and all those practices should be ethical. For example, it begins with, let's say, for example, procuring material for manufacturing. So, what material is the company procuring? Is the material ethical? Okay. How is it being procured? Okay. For example, if a company is engaged in manufacturing any jewelry items from elephant teeth, is it ethical? Of course not. If the company is engaged in leather manufacturing, okay, so they are using animal skin and they are engaged in killing of animals for that thing, is it ethical? Again, no. Okay, so procurement decision has to be ethical. Then after procurement, they will, let's say, manufacture the product. Now during the manufacturing of the product, they are heavily emitting carbon into the environment, or they are having wastage, a lot of wastage, or they are passing on their waste chemicals into the nearby local river body or something. Okay, water body. So is it ethical? No, because it is causing a lot of damage to the environment on the people of that community. Okay. Again, it's not ethical. Then after the product is manufactured, it will be packaged. So if they are using a plastic packaging, which will take years to decompose, and even after that, it will not decompose. So is it ethical? No. So recently, nowadays, most of the companies are resorting to paper packaging. Again, paper packaging is again not good for the environment because it will lead to cutting down of trees. Okay, so we have to come up with more innovative solutions for the packaging of the products. Okay. So after the packaging has been done, it will be transported. Now, how the product is been transported, whether the mode of transport is causing any emissions into the environment. Then after it has been transported, it will reach the end user, whether the product is safe for the consumption by the end user. Okay. Most of the time, we consume things which are not good for our health. For example, most of the snacks that we include palm oil, which is not good for our health, but still we are consuming it since years, because we were not aware that the palm oil is not good for our health, and it increases the chances of a heart attack. Okay. So for example, your palm oil, even your sugar content in most of your drinks. Bonvita was earlier promoted as a health drink. Now they had to change their this thing, and now they call it a normal drink. Like, it's not a health drink, but you can consume it if you want. Like, sometime you can consume, but it's not a health drink. Okay. So that has changed over the years. Okay. Now people are getting more and more aware about what they are consuming, and it should be ethical. Okay. So the company shall have integrity, it should be ethical, it should be transparent. It should be transparent about their impact that they are causing on the society. क्या impact हो रहा है उनका society के ऊपर. For that, they need to be transparent. Even if they have had any negative impacts on the people, they have to address it. For example, this company, OnePlus, a lot of users of OnePlus had a problem with the blue line in front of their screen. Okay, so that was a problem a lot of users were facing. Then the company had to come up and address the public that we are aware that our phone are having such issue, and you can get it replaced, or you can get it repaired by us. So they have to be transparent about this fact, otherwise the company's reputation will go down. Okay, so they have to be transparent about any product defects, if they have had any, if they have had any environmental hazard due to their products or their operation. So all those things need to be mentioned in a report, or they need to address it publicly. Okay. So transparent, and lastly, accountable. They have to be accountable about their actions. If they have had any negative impact, they have to be accountable for it, and they have to take steps to mitigate those negative impacts. So first principle talks about integrity, ethical, transparent, and accountable. Second principle talks about provision of goods and services in a sustainable and safe manner. Okay, they have to provide their goods and services in a manner which is sustainable and safe for their usage. Okay. So sustainable in the sense the packaging should be sustainable. Nowadays, most of the drinks, earlier, if you are aware, fruity used to have a plastic straw. Okay. Nowadays, a lot of companies are changing that. They are resorting to paper straws from the plastic straws. Okay, in order to save the turtles, marine biodiversity को protect करने के लिए. So they are providing their goods and services in a sustainable manner, and even in a safe manner. For example, if you are providing, if you are selling a product such as a cigarette, for example, so they have to give that warning that this cigarette causes cancer and all those risks associated with a cigarette. Even tobacco, even alcohol, they have to give a warning, and that is how you are, making the consumer aware about what are the negative consequences of the product, so that the person is fully aware and use it in a safe manner. So it is sustainable and safe. Goods and services are sustainable and safe. Then respect and promote the well-being of all the employees. Now again, how the company is making its policy for its employees, whether there is any compensation for any injury sustained by the employees, whether they are getting adequate sick leaves, whether they are treated properly, whether there is any culture of harassment within the organization. Okay, all these things are kept into consideration. Okay, only then the company will be called as a CSR compliant company, if it is considering all these factors also, whether they are, most of the companies in recent times, they provide counseling facilities to their employees. They ask them whether they are overburdened with the work. they provide additional bonuses, or they keep this events for the employees for social engagement and everything. So all these steps are taken by the companies in order to ensure that the employees well-being is protected. Then thirdly, respect the interest of all the stakeholders. uh, they need to address each stakeholders, and they have to know what are the problems with the various stakeholders, and they need to address those problems. They have to have a proper grievance redressal mechanism for the stakeholders. Okay. Respect and promote human rights. This is very important. This is very important for the entire subject. This topic will be repeated at least 9 to 10 times in your entire subject. Okay. So respect and promote the human rights of the various stakeholders. All the stakeholders have human rights, and the company cannot in any way damage their human rights. For example, what are the human rights? First and the basic right, that is like right to life and liberty. So how can a company affect this right? If a company, because of its operation, causes the death of a person, for example, they have let out their wastage in a drinking water facility, and that water has been used by people in the community, and it led to the death of the people. So that is directly, they are taking away the right to life. Okay. If the company, for example, is manufacturing products which are risky, for example, even your smartphone, if the smartphone is getting blasted in someone's hand, so it can also lead to the death of that person. Or even, for example, the company is not giving safety equipments to its workers, so even that can lead to the death of the employee or the worker. So the company can directly affect the right to life of any person because of its practices. Okay. So they have to respect and promote the human rights. What are the other rights? Right to education, for example, if the company is employing child labor within the organization, so that child's right to education will be affected. Okay. There are other rights against discrimination. Okay, everyone should be treated equally. If the company is making any discrimination while hiring or during the employment, then again they are taking away their right to equality. Okay, so all these it is the duty of the company to protect all the rights of the people associated with the company. Then respect and promote the environment. That is also one of the most important right. That is, they have to respect the environment. They cannot cause any harm to the environment, and they have to try to reduce and mitigate the negative consequences that they have on the environment. There should be more and more initiatives. For example, this company called as, I think, Mama Earth. Okay, they are growing trees as proportional to their sales. So that is again a very good initiative. Even in your IPL, they were planting trees for the number of dot balls that the players were scoring. So for that reason also, that is a very good initiative for the environment. So similar other initiatives, a lot of companies have a policy where they grow sapling on a birthday of their employees, so that the sapling can grow along with the employees in the organization. So again, such kind of initiatives are should be encouraged within the organization. Okay. Then, when engaging in influencing public and regulatory bodies, should do so in a transparent manner. So whenever the company is engaging or influencing public, they should do so in a transparent manner. That is, they should be doing proper reporting to the government. If they are addressing the public or they are issuing any advertisement, the advertisement should be fair and it should not be misleading. Okay. India, there are a lot of companies who tend to mislead people through their advertisements. Okay, earlier, uh, Maggie used to advertise its product as इसमें तीन रोटी के गुण हैं. That is, it has the benefits of three rotis. So, which was misleading because you cannot possibly compare Maggie with roti. So they had to take down that because the people like addressed it कि नहीं इसमें possible ही नहीं है तीन रोटी जितना good. How can you compare Maggie with Indian traditional food? Okay, so even just now I gave the example of this Bonvita, okay, and other health drink also. Okay, they are supposedly healthy drinks, but right now they had to take off their status of a healthy drink. So when they are addressing the public, they should do so in a transparent and fair manner. They should not mislead the people. Then promote inclusive growth and equitable development. They have to promote inclusive growth. They have to take all the people into uh, together and to have approach towards the inclusive growth and equitable development of all. That is, they cannot be doing any form of let's say discrimination. And even if they are promoting any particular let's say if they're doing anything for women empowerment, that is on on the basis of equity and not equality. Okay? Equality says that you must treat all the people equally. Equity says that if a certain person is lacking in something, whether they have not been given adequate resources, they have not been given adequate uh, training, so then that person needs to be given, you know, a bit more than the usual. That is on the basis of equity. Okay. Even your train reservations, the reservation in the parliament for minorities, all this, all that is based on the equity principle and not equality. Okay. So both are equally important. Equity and equality. At different places they are important. The business should engage with and provide value to their customers in a responsible manner. Okay. So it is the responsibility of a business that they provide value to their consumers. Whatever the price they are paying for their product, the business should give value for that thing. Okay. Most of the companies, tend to overcharge for their products. Okay. That should not be the case. For example, you must have heard about this hairpin that I think Gucci or some brand had made. They were charging 60,000 rupees for one hairpin. Okay, that is obviously not the exact that is that doesn't justify the costing, that is the pricing of the product. But they have earned that goodwill into the market, so they can charge any price from the people, and people will buy that product. Okay, so but it is the responsibility of a business that they need to be more they need to provide more value towards their to the consumers. So so I hope this was clear. The NGRBC principles, there is the national guidelines for responsible business conduct. They have 9 principles. The first was the company should have integrity, it should be ethical, transparent, and accountable. Then principle 2 is provision of goods and services in a sustainable and safe manner. Principle 3 talks about promoting the well-being of all the employees. Principle 4 talks about respect of all the interest of all the stakeholders. Then respect and promote human rights, promote the environment, promote when influencing public and regulatory body should do so in a transparent manner, promote inclusive growth and equitable development, and business should provide value to their customers. So these are the 9 principles. Now there are few points which are repeated in the entire syllabus. That is the well-being of all the employees. Okay. Treat how you are treating the employees. Then interest of all the stakeholders. Protect and promote human rights. Promote the environment and inclusive growth, and also provide value to their customer, that is the customer satisfaction. These are the common points of this subject. These points are going to be repeating in every other topic. Okay, these are the common points which are, basic crux of your CSR. Okay, this is the essentials of a CSR. That is basically every organization who wants to incorporate CSR, it has to have these things. That is employees welfare, stakeholder welfare, human rights protection, environmental protection, transparency, equitable development, and consumer satisfaction. These are the common points basically, which will be forming a part of other very like other topics. Now, the main part of this chapter, that is CSR in Indian legislation. CSR in Indian legislation. Okay, how and when did it come? Okay, so it came in the year 2014 on 1st April. On 1st April 2014, India became the first country in the world to legally mandate CSR provision. Okay. So it was historic for India that India was the first country in the world to legally mandate CSR. Okay. So the concept of CSR was existing in other countries as well, but India was the first country to legally mandate it. That is, making the expenditure mandatory was done only by India, and after following India, a few other countries also made it mandatory. But India was the first one to do so. India has led this thing. Okay, so India made it mandatory for the corporates to contribute to the CSR obligation. Okay, so it was the first country, and it was done in on 1st April 2014. Now, the inclusion of CSR in the Companies Act 2013 is an attempt by the government to engage business with the national development agenda. Okay, so the government was already overburdened with these things, that is the poverty alleviation, that is education, that is employment. Okay, so government is already overburdened because we are a huge population. So the government alone cannot handle that pressure. So it decided to involve the corporates also into the national developmental agenda. And there is a statutory duty on the corporate to take initiative towards a social, environmental, and economic obligation. Now it has become a statutory duty upon the companies. Okay, so they cannot, in any case, avoid this duty once they are, satisfying the criteria for CSR, satisfying the threshold for CSR. They have to contribute towards the CSR obligation. If not, they will be charged with a penalty. Okay, the penalty amount is also provided in the section 135 itself. So I hope all this is clear. India is the first country in the world to legally mandate CSR provision. The concept of CSR was existing in other countries as well before India also, but India is the first country to legally mandate the expenditure on CSR. Okay, and it was done in order to share the burden of the government in the national development agenda, and it is the duty. It is a statutory duty. It is not a moral duty. It is a legal duty upon the company to contribute to the CSR provision. Okay. So the CSR in Indian legislation is basically comprising of three parts, three elements are covered. That is your section 135 of the Companies Act 2013. Section 135 talks about entirely about the concept of corporate social responsibility. That is what companies are applicable, what companies have to comply with the CSR provisions, how they need to comply. All those things are covered in the section 135. How much CSR expenditure need to be made. All those things are covered in section 135. Then next is your schedule 7 of the act. Okay. Now your schedule 7 talks about the list of activities which are eligible towards CSR. Okay, so if a company wants to do CSR, it can do CSR only from the list of activities which are mentioned in schedule 7, which means the schedule 7 is an exhaustive schedule. Okay, it is not illustrative, it is exhaustive. उसमें से ही करना पड़ेगा. Okay, they have to do one of the activities from the schedule 7. They cannot go beyond schedule 7. If they are doing any activity which is not covered in the schedule 7, it will not be counted as a CSR expenditure. Okay. And thirdly, CSR policy rules. Okay, these have been introduced in order to simplify the procedure for the CSR. Okay, the section 135 of the act says that what is to be done, and the rules provide how it is to be done. Okay, so the act provides what is to be done, and the rules provide how it is to be done. Okay, simple. So we'll start with the most important part of this chapter or the subject, that is section 135. That is section 135, that is corporate social responsibility. Section 135 and CSR both are synonymous. अभी नींद से भी उठा के किसी ने पूछा सेक्शन 135 क्या है, CSR से याद आना चाहिए फटाक से. So what is section 135? It talks about corporate social responsibility, and the first provision, section 135, that is section 135 1, it talks about criteria or applicability. It talks about applicability. कौन सी कंपनी के ऊपर सीएसआर प्रोविजन अप्लाई करेगा, ऑन विच कंपनीज विल सीएसआर प्रोविजंस अप्लाई. Okay, those companies which satisfy any of these criteria, any of these, all of these nahi, any of these criteria. For example, if the company has a net worth of about rupees 500 crores or more, or it has a net profit of rupees 5 crores or more, or turnover of rupees 1000 crores or more in the previous financial year, then the company has to comply with the CSR provision. Simple. Okay. Net worth कितना होना चाहिए? It has to be more than 500 crores or more. Net profit has to be 5 crores or more, or turnover of rupees 1000 crores or more. If it satisfies either of these criteria, not all three, either of the three criteria, then it has to comply with the CSR provision. क्या बोला है? Every company who satisfies the criteria mentioned above is required to constitute a CSR committee. They have to constitute a CSR committee, and CSR committee बनाने का मतलब ये कि the CSR provision is applicable upon such company. Okay, so if the net worth is rupees 500 crores or more, or net profit is rupees 5 crores or more, or net turnover is rupees 1000 crores or more in the previous financial year, immediately preceding financial year, then the company will be uh, applicable. The CSR provision will be applicable upon the company, and every company who is satisfying either of these criteria in the previous financial year has to comply with the CSR provision. I hope this is easy. So the word that is being used is every company. Okay. So is it applicable upon any other entity? No. Okay. It is not applicable upon LLP. It is not applicable upon a partnership firm. It is not applicable upon any HUF. Nothing. Okay. Only applicable upon company. Okay. Now, since they've used the word company, it includes every company. It includes foreign company. It includes private company. It includes public company. It includes listed. It includes unlisted. Whatever the case may be, every company has to satisfy, has to comply with this provision if it satisfies the criteria. Okay. Now, my question to you is whether a Section 8 company will be required to comply with the CSR provision. Tell me. Whether a Section 8 company will be required to comply with the CSR provision if it satisfies the criteria. Anyone? Whether CSR provision will be applicable upon a Section 8 company if it satisfies the criteria. Tell me. Answer is yes. It will also be applicable upon a Section 8 company. Okay, since they have only mentioned the word company, it is also applicable upon a Section 8 company. Even a Section 8 company has to comply with the provision if they are satisfying the criteria. Okay, so that was about Section 135 1, which talks about the applicability of CSR provision if the net worth, that is rupees 500 crores, if the net profit, that is rupees 5 crores, and the turnover, that is rupees 1000 crores, if a company satisfies either of these criteria, then CSR will be applicable upon such company. Keyword being company and not any other organization. Okay. Then section 135 2, very simple. It talks about disclosures. It talks about disclosures. So company has to disclose two things. So every company who is covered under section 135(1) who satisfies the criteria has to disclose two things. Firstly, the composition of the CSR committee, and secondly, the contents of the CSR policy. Okay, so they have to disclose two things, that is the composition of the CSR committee and the contents of the CSR policy. Now, firstly, what is a CSR committee? Okay. The CSR committee is a committee which is formed in order to monitor the CSR activities, monitor the CSR policy, formulate the CSR policy, and recommend it to the board. So for all those purpose, a CSR committee is being made. So they have to disclose about the CSR committee, about the composition of CSR committee, as to who is in charge of this committee, who is the director, who is the independent director of this committee. Okay. So overall composition of the CSR committee, and secondly the contents of the CSR policy. What is a CSR policy? CSR policy is basically a policy document of the company in relation to CSR. All those things which need to be mentioned are included in the CSR policy. For example, what are the CSR projects that you are going to be undertaking? How you are undertaking those projects? What is your plan, strategy for the project? How you are going to arrange the funds for that project? So all those things are included in the CSR policy. It will be applicable upon the companies, just like your object of the company. The CSR policy of the company talks about what are the activities which are going to be done by the company in the upcoming years, and if they want to introduce any new activity, they can always amend. They need to amend the CSR policy as and when they want to add the activities. Okay. And all these activities have to be as per the schedule 7. They cannot contravene schedule 7. Okay. So two things need to be disclosed by the company which are covered under section 135(1). That is, firstly, the composition of the CSR committee, and secondly, the contents of the CSR policy. Two things we need to disclose. Now the question is, where do we need to disclose this? कहाँ पे disclose करना है? In the annual report on CSR. Okay. Every company who is satisfying criteria under section 135(1) has to prepare an annual report on CSR, which will be annexed to the board report. किसके साथ दिया जाएगा? बोर्ड रिपोर्ट के साथ दिया जाएगा. Okay. So two things we need to disclose. Firstly, composition of CSR committee, and secondly, the contents of the CSR policy. कहाँ पे disclose करना है? Where do they need to disclose it? In the annual report on CSR, which will be annexed to the board report of the company. Easy? Easy. समझ में आया क्या? Understood. Shall we move to the next section? That is section 135(3), functions of the CSR committee. What are the functions of the CSR committee? In section 135(1), they mentioned that if the satisfy the above criteria mentioned above is required to constitute a CSR committee. Then in 135(2), they asked you to disclose the composition of the CSR committee, and in 135(3), they are talking about the functions of the CSR committee, what they are supposed to do. So first and the foremost function of a CSR committee is basically, first function, formulate and recommend the CSR policy. Basic function of the CSR committee is they have to formulate a CSR policy, they have to draft a CSR policy, and they have to give the CSR policy to the board. The board will then verify the CSR policy and accordingly either accept or reject the CSR policy, or they can ask the committee to make any changes in the CSR policy. So it is the duty of the CSR committee to formulate a CSR policy and to recommend the CSR policy to the board. Okay. So first function is formulate and recommend the CSR policy to the board in accordance with the activities mentioned in schedule 7. Obviously, the CSR policy has to be made in accordance with the section 135 and keeping in mind the CSR policy rules, and also keeping in mind the schedule 7. Okay. Second, they have to recommend the amount of CSR expenditure. They have to recommend the amount of CSR expenditure. That is, how much expenditure do they need to make in the present year. Okay. For example, they have calculated the net profit, average net profit, and accordingly they have calculated the 2%, which is amounting to, let's say, rupees 2 crores. In this financial year, they have an obligation of rupees 2 crores towards CSR. Now, The CSR committee has an option whether they want to make the CSR committee up to rupees 2 crores, or they can do it up to 3 crores, up to 4 crores also. There is no maximum limit. There is a minimum limit, but there is no maximum limit. So accordingly, they will design the projects, and accordingly they will see whether how much expenditure is taking place. It can be more than 2, but it cannot be less than 2. Okay, so then they will come up with an amount according to their uh, project design. Okay, so they will recommend the amount of CSR expenditure, and thirdly, they will also monitor the CSR policy. They will see whether this CSR policy is being implemented properly or not. Okay. So three basic functions which are provided in the section 135(3) of the Act. What are the three functions? Firstly, formulate and recommend the CSR policy. Second thing, recommend the amount of CSR expenditure. And thirdly, monitor the CSR policy. Okay. There is also fourth function. There is also fourth function, that is formulation of annual action plan. There is a fourth function of the CSR committee, that is formulation of annual action plan. But this function has not been given in the Act, but it is given in the rules. कहाँ पे दिया हुआ है? CSR पॉलिसी रूल्स के अंदर दिया हुआ है. Okay, it has been given in the CSR policy rules and not in the Act. So यहाँ पे as per the Act there are only three functions of the CSR committee. But as per the CSR if you are considering the CSR Act as well as the CSR policy rules, there are four functions. First, formulate and recommend the CSR policy to the board. Second, recommend the amount of CSR expenditure. Third, monitor the CSR policy. And as per the rules, formulation of annual action plan. Now, what is the annual action plan? Annual action plan is basically what are the what activities which are approved by the board, how you are going to undertake those activities, how you are going to monitor those activities, how you are going to arrange funds for those activities. All those things are included in the annual action plan. Okay, that is also supposed to be prepared by the CSR committee, and it is to be recommended to the board. Then 135(4) talks about functions of the board. Obviously, 135(3) is the function of CSR committee, and 135(4) is the function of the board. So, if the CSR committee is formulating and recommending a CSR policy, then the first basic function of the board is to approve that CSR policy. Okay. So, CSR committee ने क्या किया? Recommend किया. Then CSR, the board is supposed to approve that CSR policy and disclose the contents of such CSR policy in the board's report. Yeah, they will disclose the contents of such CSR policy in the board report, and also ensure the implementation of the activities involved in the CSR policy. So, board will approve the CSR policy, and secondly, it will include the contents of the CSR policy in the board report, and along with that, it will ensure the implementation of the activities mentioned in the CSR policy. I hope this is clear. Okay. So, section 135(1) talks about the applicability, that is on which companies will the CSR be applicable. That is the net worth, turnover and net profit criteria. Net worth should be rupees 500 crores, turnover rupees 1000 crores, and net profit rupees 5 crores. If either of the three criteria is satisfied, then the company will be CSR provision will be applicable upon the company, and the company will require to formulate a CSR committee. Second, 135(2) talks about disclosure. Two types of disclosure need to be made. Firstly, disclose the composition of the CSR committee, and secondly, the contents of the CSR policy. Thirdly, 135(3) talks about CSR functions of the CSR committee. Functions of CSR committee. There are three basic functions as per the Act. That is, formulating and recommending the CSR policy to the board. Secondly, recommending the amount of CSR expenditure. And thirdly, monitoring the CSR policy. And fourth, as per the rule, formulating the annual action plan. Then 135(4) talks about the functions of the board two basic functions. Firstly, they have to approve the CSR policy and specify the details of the CSR policy in the board report. And secondly, they have to make sure the CSR policy is properly implemented, that the activities mentioned in the CSR policy are properly implemented. Okay, so these are the basic four subsections of section 135. Now the most important one, that is section 135 subsection 5. Very important, very important. This will be useful for you in the entire CSR part. Okay, so what does it specify? First basic thing, that the company need to spend at least 2% of the average net profit of 3 immediately preceding financial year. Okay, so here the limit has been specified, that is minimum how much amount you need to contribute towards the CSR activity. That is basic 2% of the average net profit of the 3 immediately preceding financial year. So you have to consider the net profit of the 3 immediately preceding financial years, whether if it is more than they need to come up with the amount, then they have to contribute 2% of that amount. Okay, that is the basic rule for CSR expenditure. They have to calculate the average of 3 years and they have to contribute 2% of that average net profit. Okay, so for example, if the previous year's profit is, let's say, uh, but first let's complete this also. If 3 years have not been complete since its incorporation, then a net profit of the remaining financial year shall be considered. What does this mean? So in the first point, they have mentioned that they have to consider net profit of 3 immediately preceding financial years. But if the company is not in existence since 3 years, then whatever years of existence the company is there, that you need to consider. For example, if the company is existing since 2 years, then you need to take the average of 2 years profit. If the company is existing only since the past year, then you need to only consider the profit of that particular year. Okay, so if the company is existing for more than 3 years, then you will consider the average of last 3 years. But if the company is not existing since 3 years, then you will only consider the remaining years. That is, if it is existing for 2 years, then you will consider the average of 2 years. If it is existing from 1 year, then you will consider that year's profit itself and you will contribute 2%. Okay, and the company, while making the CSR policy, shall give preference to local areas or the areas within which the company operates for CSR expenditure. What have they mentioned? The company has to give preference to local areas. It has to give preference to local areas because charity begins at home. So first you give preference to your local areas. Then you can do it anywhere in India, but only in India. You cannot do CSR abroad. Okay, if you are doing any activity, any social activity, social welfare activity abroad, then it will not be considered as your CSR activity for your CSR expenditure. Okay, so if you want to do a CSR expenditure, it has to be only in India, and the first preference is to be given to local areas. So every company has to define what is local area for them. A company might have various factories, various operations, various registered office at various places in India. So what is local area? So it can be any area around those premises. Okay, जहाँ जहाँ पे भी फैक्ट्री है वहाँ वहाँ पे कंपनी का क्या हो जाएगा, लोकल एरिया हो जाएगा. Okay, so the company will specify in the CSR policy as to what is their local area. What does local area mean for that particular company? So they can mention that, and it has to be given preference. Is it mandatory? कि सिर्फ लोकल एरिया में करना, इज इट मैंडेटरी? नो, इट इज नॉट मैंडेटरी. It has to be given preference. If for some reason you are not able to do CSR activity in your local area, then you can obviously do anywhere in India. There is no restriction on that, but preference पहले किसको देना है? लोकल एरिया को देना है. So first 3 points are very easy. Firstly, they have to give 2% of their average net profit of 3 immediately preceding financial year as a CSR expenditure. 2% एवरेज निकालने का है. एंड further, if a company is not in existence in a period of 3 years, then the remaining period may be counted for the average of for the 2% contribution. Okay. Then third point, if the company fails to spend the amount, then the reasons for not spending such amount shall be given by the board in the board report. Okay. If the company is unable to spend its CSR obligation, so the first thing that it has to do is to mention in the board report that we were unable to spend the CSR obligation in this particular financial year. For example, it's a CSR obligation of was rupees 1 crore, but it was able to spend only 50 lakhs. So it has to give reasons for not spending the remaining 50 lakhs. Okay. And not just that, along with that, they will also have to transfer the remaining part to the other funds specified in Schedule 7 or the unspent CSR account, depending on the case. That is the next point. Okay. So first thing, what does a company have to do if it fails to spend the amount? It has to specify the reasons for not spending the amount in the board report. That is the basic thing. That is the first thing that you have to do if the company is unable to spend the CSR amount. What is the next thing? Then, if the amount remaining unspent relates to any project other than an ongoing project. Okay. If the amount is pertaining to a project which is other than an ongoing project. Now, for that, we first need to understand what is an ongoing project. Okay, what is an ongoing project? Have you heard about this? What is an ongoing project? What does the word suggest? What can be the literal meaning of an ongoing project? A project which is ongoing for more number of years. Matlab, it is more than 1 year. Ongoing project has to be more than 1 year, and it has to be maximum 3 years. Okay. In terms of CSR, in terms of section 135, ongoing project matlab kaun sa project? Any project which is more than 1 year, but it is for a maximum period of 3 years. Such a project is called as an ongoing project. Now, in this period of 3 years, the year of commencement is not included. ये जो पीरियड 3 इयर्स का उसके अंदर ईयर ऑफ कमेंसमेंट इंक्लूडेड नहीं है. सो इफ यू इंक्लूड द ईयर ऑफ कमेंसमेंट इट विल बी मोर देन 3 इयर्स. नहीं समझा? वापस आई रिपीट इट. An ongoing project is any project which is more than 1 year and has to be maximum 3 years. But while computing this period of 3 years, you will not include the year of commencement of the project. For example, if I commence my project in 2026, okay, in let's say August 2026. So I've commenced my project in August 2026. So the period from August 2026 to April, to the first April of 2027 will not be included into the computation of a period of 3 years. So an ongoing project which has been commenced in 2026 will last till 2027, 2028 and 2029. ठीक है. So 2029 के एंड तक वो कंटिन्यू होता रहेगा. दैट इज एन ऑनगोइंग प्रोजेक्ट. आई होप दिस इज क्लियर. Okay. So an ongoing project means any project which is more than a year, but it is for a maximum period of 3 years. But during the computation of these 3 years, the year of commencement is not included, so it can go beyond 3 years. Okay. But it cannot, in any case, it cannot go beyond 4 years. 4 साल से ज्यादा कभी भी नहीं हो सकता है. 3 साल से थोड़ा ज्यादा हो सकता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, ये जो अपन ने एग्जाम्पल लिया, इन दैट एग्जाम्पल द पीरियड दैट वाज फ्रॉम अगस्त टू अप्रैल दैट वाज नॉट कंप्यूटेड इन द पीरियड ऑफ 3 years. सो वो एडिशनल और ऐड हो जाएगा, बट इन एनी केस इट विल नॉट एक्सीड 4 years. आई होप दिस वाज क्लियर. समझा? अंडरस्टूड? Yes. Can you move forward? Okay. So what has been given? If any amount remaining unspent relates to an project other than an ongoing project, then the company shall transfer such fund in a fund specified in Schedule 7 within a period of 6 months from the end of the financial year. So if it is an other than ongoing project, in that case, if an amount is remaining unspent, पैसा खर्चा नहीं किया for CSR, the amount is remaining unspent, then in that case, that fund has to be transferred to a fund specified in Schedule 7. Now, in the Schedule 7, there are a list of funds in which you can contribute directly. So you can contribute in any fund which is been specified in the Schedule 7. For example, your Clean Ganga Fund, your Swachh Bharat Kosh, all the Prime Minister National Relief Fund, all these are examples of funds specified in Schedule 7. So you can deposit your amount in any of such fund simply. Okay, so if it is an other than ongoing project, so simply if this project was supposed to be for a period of 1 year, एक साल का ही प्रोजेक्ट होना चाहिए था, बिकॉज अदर देन ऑनगोइंग बोला ना. ठीक है, सो एक साल का प्रोजेक्ट था, उसमें आपने स्पेंड नहीं किया, सो इन दैट केस द फंड नीड्स टू बी ट्रांसफर टू फंड स्पेसिफाइड इन शेड्यूल 7 within how many, within 6 months from the end of the financial year. Then if a company spends in excess of the limit specified under this section, then such company can set off the amount against the CSR obligation for the succeeding financial years. Okay, company can use this set of provision. If, for example, my CSR obligation in this particular year was, let's say, 1 crore, but I have spent already 5 crores. So 4 crore rupees of CSR expenditure I have done in excess. My obligation was only 1 crore, but I spent almost 5 crores. So 4 crores I spent in excess. So for these 4 crores, I can use the set of provision. For example, in the next year, if I have a CSR obligation of rupees 2 crores, so then in that case, I don't need to spend it from my own pocket. I can use simply set off. क्योंकि मैंने पहले excess कर लिया था ना already. Okay, I spent in excess in the previous year, so I can set off that amount, next year's obligation. Now this set off can be used for the next 3 years only, 3 succeeding years only. ठीक है, ये सेट ऑफ कब तक यूज हो सकता है? ओनली फॉर 3 सक्सीडिंग फाइनेंशियल ईयर्स एंड नॉट बियॉन्ड दैट. ओके, अब ये जो लिमिट है 3 years का, वो कहाँ पे दिया हुआ है? इट इज गिवन इन द रूल्स. It is not given in the section, it is given in the rules. In the section, it is just given that it can be used for set off for succeeding financial years. But how many succeeding financial years? That is provided in the CSR policy rules. Okay. And for the purpose of this section, the net profit shall be deemed to be net profit before tax, NPBT. During the accounting, you must have heard about this thing, net profit before tax. That is after computing the tax, before computing the tax, that it is the final net profit which is there. Okay. And it should exclude 2 things. The profit which you are considering for CSR should exclude 2 things. That is the profits earned from overseas branches, and secondly, the dividend received from companies covered under section 135. Okay. Well, when you are calculating the net profit for this section, for section 135.5, when you are calculating the net profit, you have to exclude 2 things from the calculation. That is, firstly, profits which are earned from overseas branches, and secondly, dividend which is received by the companies covered under section 135. Okay. So why do we exclude these 2 things? Profits earned from overseas branches. Okay. As I explained it to you earlier, that CSR is only for Indian legislation, Indian country, Indian economy. It is not for any other country. तुम CSR जब बाहर कर नहीं रहे हो, तो वहां के जो प्रॉफिट है उसके ऊपर भी CSR, उसको भी CSR में क्यों कंप्यूट करोगे ना? So you will not include any income which is received from overseas market, only those income which are received from the Indian market. Okay, because you are doing CSR only in India, for that you will only consider the Indian income and not overseas income, because you are going to spend CSR only in India. For that reason, you are avoiding the overseas income. Okay, so first thing, profits earned from overseas branches, and secondly, dividend received from companies covered under section 135. Okay, so if you are receiving any dividend from a company in which you have made investment, and that company is already covered under section 135, that means that company has already done CSR from that profit. If it is covered under section 135, it has already done CSR from that profit, and after that, that company is giving you dividend from that profit. So on the same profit, you cannot do CSR twice, right? एक ही प्रॉफिट से 2 बार CSR कर सकते हैं क्या? नहीं, you cannot do CSR twice from the same profit. So for that reason, if you're receiving dividend from a profit from a company which is already covered under section 135, then CSR has already been done on that profit. So दूसरी बार करने की जरूरत नहीं है. So for that reason, to avoid duplication of CSR, you need not consider the dividend received from the overseas companies covered under section 135. Understood? Easy. Okay. So that is it with today's lecture. I hope the concepts were very clear. I hope आपको मजा आया हो CSR पढ़ने में मेरे साथ. ठीक है. So hope to see you at the lectures. Okay. Bye everyone. Thank you. हो गया. Okay. हो गया. हाँ.